Good evening, class. We're so glad to have you joining us from wherever you are, whether you're local or whether you're a couple thousand miles away. Believe it or not, we have people who are that far away who tune into class. So we are looking at the tribe of Ephraim. And we are on page 2 and note number 9. And we've been looking at an area called Khwarezmia. And if you do not have that map, you can call us. We will make sure you get that map. Which I don't have right now. But so also connected to this area of Khwarezmia, and this is where we stopped last week, and that is the Kharuski people. And these people appeared in the region of Havel in Germany. So we're beginning to look at the migration of the tribe of Ephraim. And that is a very important tribe because we know that Joseph had two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And Joseph, of course, was Jacob, Israel's favorite son. And of course, one of the reasons for that was because Joseph's mother was Rachel. And we know that Jacob loved Rachel. He married Leah first, he had to, and then worked another 7 years for the woman he loved. And so she gave him Joseph. She also gave him Benjamin. And of course, Rachel died having Benjamin. But he was his father's favorite son. And so when they were reunited in Egypt, Jacob, Israel, basically adopted these first two sons of Joseph and did something very unique. He made Ephraim, who was born second, to be the basic recipient of the birthright and primogeniture. He was given the blessing of the firstborn. So also connected then, as we're studying the migration of the tribe of Ephraim after the exile from northern kingdom of Israel, we see that there was a people group called the Kharuski, and they appeared first out of Khwarezmia in the region of Havel in Germany. And later, these people, just like the other tribes we've studied up to now, they kept moving westward. And so they moved further west, and now they have become associated with the Salian Franks, F-R-A-N-K-S. Salian Franks, F-R-A-N-K-S. Now the Franks were the people group from which the Saxons came. And I'm sure that somewhere in school you've heard of the Saxons and the Angles and the Anglo-Saxons, right? And they conquered the area and absorbed them. Okay, so the Saxons then basically absorbed them. And the name Kharuski means people of Khwarezmia in Slavic. So the original and most correct application of the name Khwarezmia, and you should have that map, and it will be the map, this map. And again, if you're at home and you don't have this map, all you need to do is just let us know. We will mail it to you. It's the one that has Scythia here. And but this area of Khwarezmia is very interesting because it was in reference to the area just north of Hara. Not so much, I guess, not so much in this one. There's there's another map you can see a little bit better. Hara, which was around, obviously, the Caspian Sea. In eastern Iran, eastern modern-day Iran. So what is significant? You say, well, okay, so these people came from an area just north of Hara in eastern Iran, or the area in that they call Persia. Well, guess what? The Bible tells us that Hara was one of the places to which the exiled tribes of Israel had been transported. So if you will look with me at 1 Chronicles 5:26. First Chronicles 5:26. I know there are sections of the Bible that sometimes we never get, most people never get into, unless they're a little wacky like me. I like to go into some of these areas. But if you will look at 1 Chronicles 5:26, so the God of Israel stirred up the spirit of Pul, king of Assyria, that is Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. He carried the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh into captivity. And he took them to Hala, Habor, Hara, and the river of Gozan to this day, meaning the day that this has been chronicled. So, what does it mean then when we see that this people group obviously came from an area where the northern tribes of Israel were exiled, and then they started migrating west, but their origin as a people group, when they first became a people group, was in Hara. And we know that that's where they were exiled. That's where they were placed. So if they first, this is where this people group first appeared with this name, it says something. Obviously there's what? There's Israelite origins. Now, the Danish Skjoldings, were Skolati Scythians. You say, well, what is, okay. Well, they were descended from Shutalak. And Shutalak just happens to be a son of Ephraim. And the son of Shutalak, also known as Shatila, and if you know anything about Hebrew, which some of you should, and know that those Hebrew letters are the same. And the son of this Shatila was Bered, and you can find that in 1 Chronicles 7:20. So just so you know that I'm telling you the truth. Because that's how they're getting their name. The sons of Ephraim were now I have New King James, and what it does is it gives it a TH sound. Same Hebrew letter. So, as we look at this, just trust me, it's the same Hebrew letter. The sons of Ephraim were Shutelah, Bered his son, Tahath his son, Eladah his son, Tahath his son. So it's now going down, giving you a genealogy of this descendants of Ephraim. Now the name Bered is seen in a Gothic group, and we know, we've already done enough study to know that the Goths definitely trace their lineage back to who? The children of Israel, Israelite tribes. And so the name Bered is seen in a Gothic group named the Baradi, and in the Bardi tribe of Sweden. Because Sweden, Sweden, it's the country of Sweden. So what we know is they began to migrate. They kept moving. Now, Let me ask you a question. Did they just keep moving because they just like to move? No, they kept moving. Why? Because God had declared something. He said, I will scatter you among the nations. And he said, I will send you to the ends of the earth. Now, the Celtic city, Bard Golly, which just happens to be Bordeaux. How many have ever heard of Bordeaux before? How many know what's kind of famous in Bordeaux? Wine, Bordeaux wine. Remember we looked at that, the tribe of Reuben? So it's in southwest Gaul or France. And guess what? Bard Golly or Bordeaux gets its name from Bared. Isn't that interesting? So the tribes are doing exactly what God said he was going to do with them. Now, in addition to Shutela, other clans of Ephraim were Becher, Tahan, and Aaron. And I'm going to spell those for you. Becher, B-E-C-H-E-R. And Aaron, E-R-A-N. And just, if you go back to Numbers 26. And the 35th verse. These are the sons of Ephraim according to their families. Of Shethelah, the family of the Shuthalites. Of Becher, the family of the Bachrites. Of Tahan, the family of the Tahanites. Okay? Now the influence of the name of Becher is seen in the regions of Bukhara and Bactria. You know where? Okay. If you have this map, this is the Caspian Sea. This area east of the Caspian Sea is the area called Bactria. Okay. And so the influence of Becher in the regions of Bukhara and Bactria east of the Caspian Sea. And this area were the homes of the Aigioi or Angles. Again, how many have ever heard of Angles? That's right. The Angles and the Saxons. The Angles and the Saxons were the ones who merged into the Anglo-Saxons and basically conquered Britain. So I've skipped ahead and told you a whole bunch of stuff. Hadn't happened yet. So, and of the Sakai, Saxons. Now what's interesting, when we were in school and you were studying the Anglo-Saxons, you heard Anglos and Saxons, but you didn't ever, how many never realized when you were studying about the Saxons that the Saxons got their name from Isaac? But they did. And God had said to Abraham, in Isaac shall your descendants be named. These are all forms of a permutation of the name Itzhak or Isaac. So you had the Sakai Saxons prior to their migration to Europe. Europe, E-U-R-O-P-E. It's interesting because a people group called the Boratari, who participated in the Anglo and Saxon invasions and in Gaul, which is modern-day France, were also associated with the Franks, also derived their name from their ancestor Becher, the Boratari. Their name comes from Bared. It's as it permutates as they migrate in different languages. So these people were identical, and I want to stop here for a minute because I'm kind of just telling you stuff, and I'm not telling you how we know that. We know it by a thing called DNA. So this is not. I'm just not throwing this out to you. They have identical DNA. Their names are a little bit different because of the permutation of what they were called as they moved. But their DNA is the same. Now, isn't it interesting that people, for example, in Bactria, because there are some people still in that area east of the Caspian Sea, and isn't it interesting that there are people east of the Caspian Sea who have DNA relatives living in Britain? How many have done your DNA sitting in front of me, and you've been kind of surprised on, oh my goodness, I have relatives there? They say, you have DNA relatives. And sometimes they'll give you the big kind of printout, and they'll say you have da-da-da number of relatives here and number of relatives. Like, oh my goodness. Okay. So these people were identical with the Bulgari, who also now had a connection to the ruling dynasty of Sweden. So you got people in Bactria who have the same DNA profile as people in Sweden, and they just happen to be the ruling dynasty of Sweden. Any questions about notes on 12? Comments? Number 1, 12. Yes, the influence of the name of Bakr is seen in the regions of Bukhara and Bactria, east of the Caspian Sea, which were the homes of the Agioi, or Angles, and of the Sakai Saxons prior to their migration to Europe, and the Boraktuari, who participated in the Anglo and Saxon invasions and in Gaul or French, were also associated with the Franks, also derived their name from their ancestor Bakr. These people were identical, DNA-wise, with the Bulgari, who also had a connection to the ruling dynasty of Sweden. You're welcome. Okay, now the Teutons, T-E-U-T-O-N-S, T-E-U-T-O-N-S. How many have ever heard of the Teutons? Maybe it was years ago in school, but you heard about the Teutons. How many have ever heard Teutonic? Teutonic people. Okay, a couple of you. Well, guess what? The Teutons belong to the Ephraimite clan of Tahan. And from the name of Tahan, we get the name Tahuni. Now guess what? The name Tahuni in the east, okay, in the area of like Bactria, east of the Caspian Sea, guess what? That was a name applied to the Scythian, now get this, Sakai, S-A-C-A-E. And we know the Sakai gave rise to the Saxons.
Is that F-A or S-A?
S. I know, I come from the Ohio River area. I talk funny. I'll never forget my mother, and it is that southeastern Ohio, yeah. And I never forget, my mother had a doctor, really a nice man. And he always said to my mom, he said, would you just talk for me for a little while? He said, I just love to hear you talk because it's different. And she just looked at him, she said, I'm from southeastern Ohio. So I realized that because I went from southeastern Ohio to northwestern Ohio to go to university. And every professor I had told me I talked funny. And I always felt they talked funny. Okay. So, Scythian Sakai, S-A-C-A-E. Now, Tahan was a son of Ephraim. And he also had other descendants. And we believe that he was connected to the Tabiani, and this is kind of interesting, because now you have Ephraim, the tribe of Ephraim, so you have Tahan, who is a son of Ephraim, and he's connected to the Tabiani, who neighbored the Joseph descendant. Remember, there were descendants of Joseph who were not descendants of Ephraim and Manasseh. Remember what God said to Joseph? these two are mine. They're gonna each have a full inheritance as tribes in their own right. And then he made a statement to Joseph, did he not? Any other sons you have are yours.
Yeah.
So Joseph had other sons. And when they were probably amalgamated in with other tribal identities, maybe their brothers, maybe other tribal identities. They were still a part of Israel. But he said, they're your sons. Okay, they're not mine, so they're not technically called what? Children of Israel, because that was a term of the 12 tribes. But he said, they're still your descendants. And the descendants of Joseph, remember we said there is the ASP prefix that you're going to see in descendants of Joseph. And so what happens is these sons of Ephraim, descendants of Ephraim, neighbored, they lived close to the Joseph descendant Aspasi in Chorazmia. Probably didn't know they were family. By this time, the descendants didn't know their family, but how many have ever heard the expression growing up, birds of a feather flock together?
Oh, yeah.
And it stands to reason. And we are going to see this as they migrate. That basically tribes that were close to each other in their tribal land allotments in the nation of Israel are going to end up close to each other, bordering each other as they migrate across the world. So later in Europe, which I've now already told you and now I'm going to tell you again, later in Europe, these same people went by the name Tabantes. And they settled in West Germany. They settled first in West Germany as they're moving west, and were then absorbed by the Franks and Saxons. They're absorbed by them, and more than likely migrated westward with them, not knowing what? Their family descended from brothers. Because in essence, they all had the common father of Joseph, and then they're brothers, but didn't know it. But said, we got something in common. We got something in common. So they just merged together and migrated west together. Now, Aaron, E-R-A-N, the son of Shutalach, was the grandson of Ephraim. And he gave rise to a clan of Ephraim, and an area to which the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel was exiled. Okay, so in other words, this is another area where when the Assyrians exiled them, they exiled a group, this clan, and this area then became a Scythian center known as Aran. A-R-R-A-N. So you can, how many are beginning to see a name similarity? You had Aaron, E-R-A-N, and he gave rise to a clan of Ephraim called the Aaronites. And then they get exiled, and then it becomes a Scythian center known as Aran, A-R-R-A-N. Now there is a region in Scotland that is known as Aran, A-R-R-A-N, Scotland. I don't believe that's accidental. Oh, well, this is it. This is just what we call this place. Well, no. Because as they move, they still have memory of something, and it reminds them of home. And so now they get in the area of Scotland, and they settle, and what do? Well, they call this. And how many have ever heard of naming something new something? Okay, new something. Okay, let me give you an example. What was the name of New York before it was New York? New Amsterdam.
Oh, yeah, New Amsterdam.
Why? And we're going to get into that when we get in, not in this tribe, but when we get into the tribe of Zebulun. Why? Why did they name it that? Well, because they're coming, and it's like, okay, we're settling this new place, but we've come from here. This is New Amsterdam. The county in which I grew up happens to be named for the island from which many of those people came. It's called Guernsey County in Ohio. Do you know where it comes from? The Isle of Guernsey. Why? Because when they came, it was like, oh, this reminds us of Guernsey. Now, if you know anything about the Isle of Guernsey, they had dairy farms. Ever hear of Guernsey cows?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
We had a great uncle, Uncle Asa. We called him AC because I called him AC because I didn't know it was Asa. And guess what he did? He raised dairy cows. Now, I just want to tell you something. The sidebar has nothing to do spiritually, has nothing to do with what we're studying. I will never forget the day that he gave me milk right out of the cow. Now, I really liked Uncle Ace, but when it hit my mouth, it went on the ground. So he said, okay. So he had a great big steel cooler. And he went over and he put a glass over there. And he said, now drink this. I said, this is good. He said, it's the very same milk. He was, that generation. It's the very same milk. I said, no. So, and the reason why I'm sharing this with you, I want you to see, this is what happened as the tribes migrated. And I believe one of the reasons why that happened is so that God is allowing us now to begin in this time, and I believe this is the time that a lot of people are getting interested in this, because I believe we are in the end times. And so what we're seeing, and now we're seeing that never knew this, never knew the DNA connection, never knew the language connection, never knew the art. Remember we looked at the art that, why would you have a certain art style in one place and then you get over into Europe, you've got the very same art style. They're just a language. Why is it? Oh, when we begin to look at the language and the connections actually to Hebrew and a dialect of Hebrew spoken by the northern kingdom of Israel that pops up as they begin to migrate. I don't believe it's accidental, but I believe that now is the time when God's allowing us to see all this. And I don't know about you, but I'm a little excited about it, because we're going to talk a little bit about Aaron. The country of Ireland received migrants of Hebrew and Scythian descent, and the island of what we know as Ireland today was once called Erin. And the names of Aaron, E-R-I-N, and Aaron, E-R-A-N, are all similar. And remember, Aaron, E-R-A-N, was the son of Shetelach, who was the grandson of Ephraim. So remember the names Aaron, A-R-R-A-N, and Aaron, E-R-I-N, and Aaron, E-R-A-N, are all similar. All have the same root. And so we see that descendants from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, which makes sense because they were what? They were brothers, and both were adopted by their grandfather, Jacob Israel. And they seem to have been concentrated in, and I've worded it this way for a reason, not so much just Britain, but descendants from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh seem to have been concentrated in the nations who settled the British Isles. So that was the first thing. They were scattered among the British Isles, those people groups, and eventually were scattered among all peoples of British origin. So you're going to find the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, but primarily Ephraim, all over. Now, where would then you expect to find descendants of Ephraim? Well, obviously Britain. You'll find some in Ireland, you'll find some in Scotland, some in Wales, but guess what?
United States.
South Africa, New Zealand, Australia. Why? The British West Indies. Why? Because those were nations that came from Britain. Now understand, when Jacob Israel was blessing Ephraim and Manasseh, even though Manasseh was the actual firstborn, he gave the firstborn blessing to Ephraim, and of course Joseph said, no, and he said, I know, son, my son, I know. He also shall be great, but Ephraim would be a father, and here's the key, many nations, plural. Has Britain not given birth to many nations? Had a great empire. It was once said, what? The sun never sets on the British Empire. That was never said in the United States. And we even have been very bold in our declaration of what? We are not in the business of nation building. You know, we're there to help, but we're not nation building. So these peoples have played a unique role in history beyond that of other Israelite nations as a whole. And the reason is because of the fact that they've given rise to nations. So this historical record, no doubt, stems from the character of their forefather Joseph. And I go back to what was said about Joseph. What Jacob Israel said about Joseph. He said, what about his descendants? He said, they're going to do what? They're going to go over the wall. And I would simply say, isn't that what has happened? They've gone everywhere. And he said he would be fruitful. He said, a fruitful bough are you, Joseph. You've gone over the wall. Now, I'm going to try to pull together some stuff of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh because they are very much intermingled with each other. Because Great Britain and the United States of America. Ephraim, primarily Great Britain, and Manasseh, the United States of America. Now, most of the people groups identified as descended from the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh are seen to have migrated to the British Isles. Okay? So, most of Ephraim and Manasseh. Does that mean there aren't some Ephraimites and Manasseites somewhere? Yeah, but very, very small groups. Now, from Britain came many of the settlers of South Africa. Because how many of you know South Africa is an English-speaking, British origin nation? New Zealand. Australia. And our neighbor to the north, Canada. So Australia, Australia, Canada, Canada, as well as the United States of America. So how many are beginning to see nations?
They also had India.
Yeah, India. You know, when you begin to see what that prophecy, and remember, that prophecy was in the book of Genesis. And we're sitting here in 2023, and we're looking back and saying, wow, exactly what Jacob Israel declared. We're seeing with our own eyes, have seen. Now, it is apparent that the characteristics and symbols of Britain relate to Ephraim. And we've looked at those, the nations. And those of the United States of America are applicable to Manasseh. So Ephraim, E-P-H-R-A-I-M. And actually it's Ephraim. But our English pronunciation is Ephraim, and that's what most people call it. And Manasseh, M-A-N-A-S-S-E-H. So now I want us to look at the descendants of Ephraim. We've already looked at the descendants of Manasseh. Descendants of Ephraim. You have the Aegel, A-E-G-E-L. And that is Jeremiah 31:18. Jeremiah 31:18. Now, the reason why I'm talking about the Aegel, let me read the scripture and I'll explain it to you. I have surely heard Ephraim bemoaning himself. You have chastised me, and I was chastised like an untrained bull. A bull, a male calf bull, is called an Aegel. Okay, that's where you get it. Restore me, and I will return, for you are the Lord, my God. Okay. So, and that is obviously what Ephraim needed to, because Ephraim and Manasseh were the primary tribes of the northern kingdom, the preeminent tribes, and Ephraim being actually the most prominent. And that's why when you will read certain of the books of the prophets, when they're giving messages to the northern kingdom of Israel, sometimes they don't say northern kingdom or something, they'll say what? Ephraim. And they're not just speaking directly to Ephraim, they're speaking to all the northern tribes, but because it's the preeminent primogeniture tribe, they'll say, and the Lord would say to Ephraim, but that was all of the northern kingdom. So from there you get the Aigloi people groups in history, Aigaloi, Angli, and then what? All names of Angles, A-N-G-L-E-S, Angles. And that's the same Angles we read about in history that become the Anglo-Saxons. Then you have the Agali, and the Agali were found north of Bactria, B-A-C-T-R-I-A. So they were found north of here, east of the Caspian Sea. We know that east of the Caspian Sea was an area to which the northern tribes of Israel were exiles. And then you had the Aigloi, which were actually found in Bactria, actually in the area of Bactria. Okay, any questions about the descendants of Ephraim? Okay, clans of Ephraim, and I know we're not going to get through all of the clans tonight. So I will probably get through the clans Shutelach or Shutela, And so from them, the reason why I'm giving you this, I'm not expecting you to be able to rattle this on, absolutely not. But if you want to do some study on your own about these people groups and say, wow, when God said he was going to scatter his people all over the earth, to the ends of the earth, here are these people groups, and they're here, and they're here, and they're here, and they all go back in some respect to these tribes. So you have the Sittones, Sittones, and guess where they're found? In Scandinavia. And I'll spell it for you.
I got it right here now.
If you're at home, we have somebody who has, every time we have Scandinavia, it's like, oh. So Scandinavia, Scandinavia. And we know that originally it was Scandinavia, and I don't mean to, but it's because primarily settled by the tribe of Dan. And remember, Dan was a tribe, he was likened to a serpent, and the purpose of that is, as he migrated, if you're particularly in the desert, you can see where a snake has gone. If you're in the desert, Israel, you can see if there's been a viper around, because you could follow, they leave a trail, right? And so basically, it was said of Dan that he's going to leave a trail, serpent's trail, like a serpent. Now, I will tell you that the tribe of Dan has indeed done that. Because we talked about the Danube River, but remember we looked at a lot of other Dan places. Wherever he went, he just stamped his name on it. Well, when he got to Scandinavia, it's Scandinavia. Okay. The Skjold, and Skjold was an ancestor, and he was the head of a clan of the tribe of Ephraim, and he was an ancestor of the Anglo-Saxons, Anglosaxons. So Skjold, and I will tell you, you can do, if you go online or if you get in the library or something, I know the library is kind of but now library has high tech, so you can go to the library and do the same thing. If you will look at Skjold, you will find a great deal of information on the Anglo-Saxons. And then you had another people group, and you can see while it all kind of goes back to that name, you have the Skjoldings, who are found in the nation of Denmark, another place that was originally Denmark. Okay, we'll pick up next week with the clan of Aaron. And you'll be very interested to know that descendants of Aaron, that clan, are found many places. And then we will finish all the clans, and then we will get in some other information. Because I said to you that about the importance of 13 and some things when we looked at Manasseh, but we're going to look at that with Ephraim. That also becomes very significant. So we will hopefully finish up the tribe of Ephraim next week. So if you are there, if there's anything you are watching online, there's anything you need, you would like a map that we've been referring to, something we did tonight, because this is being recorded on Israel's Independence Day. We did sing the Israeli national anthem, and I did a handout showing people the English lyrics, the Hebrew, and then the Hebrew transliteration. And if you would like one of those, all you need to do is call, give us your name and address, and we will get those mailed to you. You can actually stop and pick them up if you're local. If you would like to give in response to the teaching you are receiving, you can send it in You can drop it off in the drop box. Just mark it. You will mark it Joash Chest, Joash. We will know it's for Wednesday night in response to that. If you're here, there's a Joash chest in the back. If you have a prayer request, we'd love to pray for you. If you have comments or questions, would you please be so kind as to mail those in or call those in, and I will be more than happy to address your questions and your comments in class. So I will be right here in the same place next week, looking at you right through that camera, and I hope that you are seeing how big our God is and how big His plan is. And guess what? You're in His plan. Have a wonderful rest of the week.